This is Cristina Maranci, and I'm so happy to be speaking with you. Cristina is currently professor at Harvard University, and she's the main specialist in Armenian art. So I would maybe like just to start the beginning, if you can say to us a few words about how you would introduce Ani.
I usually introduce it as a deserted medieval city, as a medieval city that is uninhabited, and that is a treasure, an archive of architecture, art, painting, sculpture, inscriptions, archaeology. Another way I introduce it is as a royal capital of Armenia. As much as we talk about and need to talk about the ways that it presents a convergence of cultures, Georgian, Armenian, Islamic, all of those elements and more make up what Ani is. But I think understanding it first as a landscape of ruins and of important churches, that makes the most sense to start with.
I'm in Ani, in the place Cristina Maranci describes as a landscape of ruins and of important churches. And I'm in a place which is alive from a presence of an Armenian culture from at latest the 5th century, when it's firstly documented the Kamsarakan family presence here in the former Cittadella, which was the core of the ancient city. The city changed its propriety, but was linked to important Armenian families up to the 10th century, when it became the capital of the kingdom, of the newly reformed kingdom of Armenia, and when it became one of the most splendid and impressive cities of the world. The kings, Gagik and others, were here to build a marvelous place, inviting the best architectures and using art as a way of representing the unique power at the crossroad between Asia and Europe. There is an amazing monument in Ani. It's the cathedral. Can you, Cristina, please tell us a few words about this building and the architect who had done it to that?
This is a rare moment where we have a textual source that tells us, this is the universal history of Stepanos Taranatsi, which is an early 11th century Armenian source, that tells us about an architect, Terdat, the stoneworker, who is mentioned in this text both as the architect of the Cathedral of Ani, of Argina Cathedral as well, which was this kind of predecessor, which has now been demolished by explosives. But we also know him from this same text. We know that he repaired the Hagia Sophia from earthquake damage in the 10th century. Just to have this notice, written notice of an architect, or a medieval architect who's working across cultures, for whom we know we have still standing buildings, that's an extraordinary thing in and of itself, and can be taken as a point of departure for thinking about cross-cultural architectural practices, what an architect can learn, what a lived experience of an architect is across cultures, and help us to understand both monuments. For anybody who's been to the cathedral, you can feel the level of design, the level of kind of care with, care for, design of the tiniest details.
This is indeed a fantastic monument, but there are in Ani other none less interesting buildings, right? How this can happen, that in the middle of the 10th century Armenia we have a life-size almost standing sculpture of a man with the model of his church.
One interesting angle that one could take is thinking about Gagik and Ani in comparison to Akhtamar and that Gagik, and to what extent Gagik was responding to that earlier image of the royal patron, Gagik Artsruni, at the Church of Akhtamar in the 10th century, now in in the Van region of what is now Turkey, presents himself on that church, fairly large, but in low relief, with Gagik, the Bagratid king in the latter 10th century up north in Kars. We have now as you said, an almost in the round, massive over life-size image of the king with his model. So to what degree this is a kind of competition with the earlier Artruni king is unclear, but in any case, it is an extraordinary way to show yourself in the medieval world of the Caucasus as well as in lots of places. It's unusual.
The general stereotypes, which now are proven as not being right, but still, the idea is the Armenian art is mainly aniconic. We know that there are many murals which have been discovered or analyzed and so on, but still, where this idea of such a huge sculpture from? Because I follow you with the idea of competition with Akhtamar, but with all respect I have for Akhtamar, the sculpture of Gagik is showing us another side of the Armenian world, which is so extraordinary. So how can we explain this?
What I think would be happening in the late 10th and early 11th century in Ani is just an extraordinary moment of architectural culture and a prizing of architectural culture for what it can do, a kind of ambitiousness of architects, of patrons. I think there's an intense interest too in the deeper past, how the Bagratids sort of positioned themselves in and against a 7th century landscape that they knew well. And we know, of course, that Gagik's church was a copy, intended as a copy of the 7th century church of Zvartnots, which is in the Republic of Armenia. And, you know, this also gets to kind of the incredible sophistication of the designs that I just mentioned of Ani Cathedral, but also of other foundations like Khutskonk, like Gagkashan, the Church of Gagik. So as much as I can kind of glean now from the evidence, I think that there's something going on with regard to architectural virtuosity that was very important and possibly part of kind of how Gagik saw himself as a patron, not just of churches, but of a kind of technology, of a kind of technology, a capital, an intellectual capital in the sense of kind of, you know, command over resources.
To better understand the phenomenon of Ani, one should consider also the important monasteries and churches all around the city, which are actually belonging to a large hinterland, which we should consider together with the city itself. Parlons de Křižovatku, on va aussi parler de l'histoire triste de la région. Patrick, est-ce que tu pourrais nous dire quelques mots sur ce monastère exceptionnel qui se trouve aujourd'hui en Turquie orientale?
C'est un endroit relativement difficile d'accès. Quand on vient depuis la région de Kars par le plateau, il faut gentiment descendre au fond de la vallée. Ce n'est pas très difficile, mais enfin oui, c'est relativement protégé, effectivement. D'une façon générale, on a observé que les monuments arméniens, à la différence des géorgiens, sont très rarement en position dominante dans la nature, mais très souvent intégrés, soigneusement intégrés dans la nature, ne la dominant presque jamais. Nous parlons donc du monastère de Khutskonk, qui se trouve effectivement à l'extrémité orientale de la Turquie, dans la région de Kars, précisément dans la région de Tekoj ou Digoj en turc, Tekoj en arménien. C'est un petit ensemble dont il ne reste plus qu'un seul élément, l'église principale, elle-même très fortement endommagée. Donc au départ, il y avait 4 petites unités qui constituaient cet ensemble. Petites parce que ce sont de toutes petites églises, voire même des chapelles, en fait, qui sont disposées près les unes des autres, mais en même temps séparément. Et il n'y avait pas, semble-t-il, au début, au moment où l'ensemble s'est constitué, c'est-à-dire à la fin du Xe au XIe siècle, il n'y avait pas apparemment de narthex, ce qui est une anomalie pour un monastère arménien.
Patrick, pourrais-tu nous dire quelque chose sur les différents édifices qui composaient cet ensemble?
Je voulais dire que la petitesse des unités qui constituent cet ensemble est peut-être liée à une spécificité fonctionnelle qui probablement une fonction mémoriale et peut-être même funéraire. Je pense que c'est aussi lié à la typologie, à la forme de l'église principale et de la deuxième église qui était à côté, des églises très centrées et à tendance rotondale, avec en particulier sur l'église qui est encore en partie conservée, le très beau dôme en ombrelle, sur lequel j'ai beaucoup travaillé dans l'article que tu mentionnais. Pour en revenir au monastère, les monastères n'étaient pas encore probablement fortifiés. Période classique, disons, 10e, 11e siècle, et peut-être même encore 12e, 13e, 14e, on ne sait pas exactement. Hein. Mais il est possible que les monastères n'aient commencé à être consolidés, entourés de murs, qu'à partir du 13e, 14e siècle, période où vraiment les menaces se faisaient très lourdes sur les monuments, du fait des invasions, des occupations turques, puis surtout mongoles. Je crois la volonté de se fondre, de s'unir à la nature et de ne pas vouloir la dominer.
Donc cette espèce de quasi-écosystème que tu respectes par l'édifice.
Voilà, exactement. Une approche d'écosystème, oui.
Ce qui, en fait, on observe assez bien. Il y a, j'imagine, aussi une question, appelons-la spirituelle, parce qu'il y a quand même l'idée d'un désert qui est transformé par le monastère lui-même en paradis, n'est-ce pas? I really think there is something, as you said, architecture, sculpture, a place of excellence and transfer of technology in a way, in a particular ecosystem, which is not the easiest place to live. Actually, Ani is high, I mean, semi-desertic climate.
I think that was precisely it. When you look at churches like the Sarkis Church at Chotskonk, when you look at that extraordinary Kizkale or Akshkaperd, which is south of the Citadel of Ani, or, for example, Surpragich, where the base of this structure is actually narrower than the superstructure. You're seeing, I think, tremendous audacity. And I think that's really this kind of impulse to, right, that maybe could be compared to what's going on in Western Europe. You can think about Gothic, I suppose, but it's this kind of sense of pushing the boundaries of what gravity holds one to.
The returning motif is, we are now well, we build the paradise, but tomorrow Persians will arrive and destroy everything. And so if this, making memory is not part of the game, right? That you should survive over all tragedies of history.
The Bagratids saw themselves as the restoration. They didn't see themselves as a new kingdom. They were the restoration of the old kingdoms. They were part of a much longer line. And that is, I think, crucial to understand.
Si on se situe par rapport à Ani, Ritskon n'est pas le seul lieu autour de la ville, n'est-ce pas? Il y a des autres monastères comme Hormos. Oui. Il y a des sites très importants, Marmachen également. Est-ce que tu pense qu'on peut parler vraiment d'une espèce de couronne de lieux saints autour de la capitale, quelque chose qui ferait partie d'une topographie, d'un paysage sacré, ou je m'avance trop?
Il faudrait voir la carte, mais effectivement, c'est une idée qui peut être soutenue, parce que ces très beaux ensembles entourent la capitale, c'est exact. On a émis la même idée à propos des forteresses qui se trouvent à proximité de la ville. Ça a été contesté plus récemment, notamment par une mission française qui a travaillé sur ces sites. Mais effectivement, on ne peut pas s'empêcher de ne pas observer la présence de couronnes de monastères, de fortifications autour de la capitale.
Giovanni, potresti essere così gentile a dirci qualcosa sui viaggiatori che hanno scoperto la città di Ani?
Dobbiamo sempre ricordare che questi viaggi, questi sopralluoghi, non erano viaggi di piacere, né erano viaggi organizzati nella stragrande maggioranza e in particolar modo finanziati e supportati sul piano proprio logistico dai singoli studiosi. Si trattava di vere e proprie missioni diplomatiche, quando non direttamente accompagnanti missioni militari. Quindi ci sono degli specifici interessi che oggi definiremmo in larga parte coloniali nei confronti di questi territori. Non è un caso che questi viaggiatori, come dire, provengano da nazioni interessate politicamente a quella costola, naturalmente, del continente eurasiatico, e pubblichino spesso sotto gli auspici del governo francese, eccetera, eccetera. D'altra parte questo è un fenomeno che riguarda tutto l'Ottocento, non solo l'Ottocento, e che non riguarda sicuramente solo l'Armenia.
Se vuoi è un'idea di un signore romantico che viaggia, scopre questo paesaggio mozzafiato e vi proietta ovviamente un'esperienza occidentale, quindi Pompei.
Assolutamente. L'Armenia pone un problema, l'Armenia storica pone un enorme problema, che è quello di riportare in Occidente e integrare in Occidente una realtà estremamente complessa che deve essere ridotta ai minimi termini. E dobbiamo sempre ricordare che nel corso dei decenni centrali, in particolare del XIX secolo, tra l'Armenia storica e l'Europa occidentale, la cui storiografia sull'architettura era in epoca romantica in esplosione per le ragioni che conosciamo, il nazionalismo etnico tipico dei fenomeni romantici, non c'è nulla in mezzo. Nel senso che l'architettura bizantina è conosciuta nei suoi monumenti principali e molto scarsamente. E l'Armenia risulta come se fosse una cellula isolata che deve essere in qualche maniera reintrodotta in questo sistema.
So one of the issues when meeting the arts of, for example, places such as the Caucasus, and even more so a place like Ani, where we have different cultures which are intermingling in various ways, is that these scholars, either physically going there or through the images and accounts that they will find from this region, will meet something which is completely alien to them. It's something else, something new. Some of the reactions, therefore, will be to marginalize this art, to put it aside as something else, and another reaction will be to embrace it to a certain extent and to try to understand it.
Essenzialmente abbiamo un mito di come l'arte si è sviluppata e tutto ad un tratto abbiamo questa voce esterna che ci rovina un po' il panorama.
E questo naturalmente pone un problema nel momento in cui ci si ritrova, parlando di Ani, monumenti che vengono iniziati alla fine del X secolo e nella quale i viaggiatori, chi comincia a realizzare le prime incisioni, i primi disegni scientifici, potremmo dire, su questi monumenti, rinvengono degli elementi che non dovrebbero stare lì, il cui primato appartiene ad altre, appartiene a noi, appartiene naturalmente a un altro mondo.
E come reagiscono? Perché comunque, insomma...
Come reagiscono? Possono reagire in diverse maniere. Ci sono casi come appunto quelli di Charles Texier, che potremmo definire un pochino illuminati da un'ottica naturalmente di XXI secolo. Texier, quando va a osservare la cattedrale di Ani, che prima di allora era stata sì visitata ma non illustrata come la illustra lui, siamo negli anni 40 dell'Ottocento, lui riconosce questi elementi e per certi versi ammette che possano essere esistiti fenomeni architettonici precedenti anche allo sviluppo dell'arte romanica e gotica nell'Europa occidentale. Per certi versi è abbastanza pacificato. Nel momento in cui però ci ritroviamo casi, per esempio, come il tedesco Karl Schnasse, per la sua storia dell'architettura, siamo sempre negli anni 40, quindi un contemporaneo di Texier, scrive una storia dell'architettura in cui integra elementi dell'architettura armena, un breve capitoletto, basandosi essenzialmente sulle cronache dei viaggiatori, ed ecco si ritrova, come dire, gli edifici di Ani che vengono tutti post-datati. Oppure, se non vengono post-datati, si dice che è sicuramente frutto di un intervento di architetti occidentali, maestranze occidentali che si trovano lì per le crociate. Ma la post-datazione è un elemento molto molto comune, soprattutto per quanto riguarda la regione di Ani.
The glory of Ani has an end. This end is after changing of powers, basically mid-15th century. The Catholic one is moving away. The commercial road is moving away as well, so no money. Ani is disappearing. Then it will be discovered in the 19th century, right? Even earlier, but this is kind of huge rediscovery. But then we have this last stage, this sad part of Ani, right?
Yeah.
After the Mars excavation, we are losing the museum, we are losing the collections. And we are assisting to more or less systematic destruction within Ani and around Ani. Tell us a bit about this second story, the story of Ani after Ani.
After the excavations of Mar and after the devastation of the First World War and the genocide, We know there was a period in which the intention was to erase Ani from the landscape by the Turkish Republic, and luckily that didn't happen.
We are now in eastern Anatolia, and this is a place where in 1915 occurs one of the most dramatical events of the history of humankind. Innocent civilian men, women and kids, about 1.5 million of people, were killed in a systematic way due to orders of the government of the Ottoman Empire. Talam Pasha, the man who was responsible for this event, which we can call without any hesitation as a major genocide, was trying to galvanize the Ottoman Empire in loss of power, and was trying to create an internal enemy to justify the unsuccess of the First World War. The very dynamic has a deep root, which are going back to the early 19th century, when the Western powers were using Christian minorities to destabilize the empire of the Ottomans. This is the beginning of the worst which the 20th century produced.
Patrick, mais une question évidemment qu'on a déjà touchée, et c'est l'état actuel de Hritscon, parce qu'on a eu des photos des années du tout début du XXe siècle, disons, où nous observons ces 5 églises qui semblent être en pleine forme. Et aujourd'hui, nous en avons une seule, et moi j'y suis allé avec mes étudiants, et cette église a visiblement été dynamitée. Et en plus, on a trouvé des débris des autres églises et des khachkars tout autour dans les collines. Donc visiblement, on a fait exploser ces lieux. Donc est-ce que tu pourrais nous dire un peu sur ce qui s'est passé en fait à Hritscon? Comment est-ce qu'on en est arrivé à ça?
Nous savons qu'il y a eu plusieurs campagnes, si j'ose dire, de destruction depuis la fin du XIXe siècle en Turquie, et en particulier dans la partie orientale, celle où il y avait la plus forte concentration d'Arméniens. Donc il y a eu les massacres de la fin du XIXe sous le sultan Abdülhamid, qui ont entraîné beaucoup de destruction, en particulier dans le Vaspurakan, c'est-à-dire dans la région de Van. Ensuite, il y a eu le génocide de 1915, qui a été suivi de destruction, et ça on en a des preuves assez précises. Et dans les années encore qui ont suivi, jusqu'au début des années 20, très nombreuses destructions. Et puis ensuite, plusieurs vagues au cours du XXe siècle. Et il y en a une qui est à peu près bien identifiée dans les années 1950. 1900, c'est au milieu du XXe siècle. Et là, dans la région de Kars, il y a des témoignages de gens qui disent qu'effectivement, on a détruit des monuments de Hritscon. Ça collerait assez bien avec le témoignage de monsieur et madame Thierry, qui y étaient en 1958, si mes souvenirs sont bons, et qui ont vu le monastère déjà dans l'état à peu près que nous connaissons aujourd'hui. C'est-à-dire qu'en 1958, déjà, le monastère avait été très gravement détruit et avait l'état qui est le sien à peu près aujourd'hui.
Autant on comprend bien que l'on détruise des monuments lors d'événements comme le génocide de 1915 ou alors comme des événements de la fin du 19e siècle, moins facile à comprendre pourquoi dans les années 50, après la Seconde Guerre mondiale, on a cette nécessité de détruire des monuments arméniens dans la région. Est-ce que tu as une explication pour ça?
Il y a des montées de fièvre régulières en Turquie pour ce qui est des relations avec les minorités chrétiennes et juives. Et au début des années 50, il y a eu une telle vague. Ça ne pouvait pas ne pas se traduire par une volonté de détruire, comme on l'a toujours fait. J'ajoute que ça n'est pas la seule. Je disais plusieurs vagues. Il y en a eu encore une dans les années 70, tout près de nous. Et donc, là, on ne sait pas qu'est-ce qui a motivé cela. C'est difficile à dire, mais dans les années 50, oui, il y a eu de gros problèmes en Turquie avec les minorités, en particulier grecques et arméniennes.
We are standing today in the 7th century Basilica of Mren, which is one of the most impressive monuments of the period. We are in the middle of a desert, but once this was a big, flourishing city. And today, as you see, the state of preservation is catastrophic. On the one side, obviously, the region is seismical, and the church has been abandoned already in the 13th century. But unfortunately, we see also traces of the use of heavy military weapons, which damaged the building, and consequently, in 2018, the southern wall of this building collapsed, and today the building is in danger of not surviving the next seismic event or any other problem. So we are basically in a monastic heritage, which by its quality, belongs to the top of what humankind has preserved up to now. And so, in this Kars region, where Armenian inhabited from 1,000 years, we have the impression that there is a desire of letting collapse the memory of this presence, being it in Khitskon, here in Ren, or in Hormos, as we will see.
Hormos, véritablement, c'est une catastrophe. Et il y a un témoignage qui est très intéressant qui concerne, tu le sais sans doute, la très belle église de la Sainte-Croix d'Artamage, qui était prévue pour être détruite également à cette période-là, en 1950. Et c'est un célèbre écrivain turc qui l'aurait, alors qu'il était à cette époque-là encore un jeune officier, qui l'aurait sauvé en intervenant, en disant qu'il était absolument impossible qu'on détruise cette église. Yaşar Kemal, le fameux auteur, devenu ensuite fameux auteur turc.
Je pense que c'est évident qu'on parle là de cette relation très douloureuse entre l'Empire ottoman et la Turquie moderne et la question arménienne qui vraiment est un fil rouge de tragédie, en fait, unie sur le 19e et 20e siècle. Mais ma question va aussi un peu vers l'aujourd'hui, parce que quand on va dans la région, déjà ces monuments, à part Ani, sont très difficiles d'accès. On ne veut pas laisser les touristes y aller, en fait. On se trouve souvent à être empêchés. Et visiblement, on ne fait rien pour les sauver. Donc, Khitskon est menacé de tomber. Mren est dans un très mauvais état. La même chose peut être dit pour Hormos. Est-ce que tu crois que nous pouvons aujourd'hui faire quelque chose, comme historiennes et historiens de l'art, pour changer la situation?
Notre collègue Christine Amarangi a essayé d'organiser une campagne pour la défense, pour la protection du site de Mren, en faisant intervenir des organisations des États-Unis. Je pense que c'est une des voies qu'on peut suivre. J'ai publié en Turquie une version abrégée de l'article auquel tu faisais référence sur Khutskong, en essayant de le diffuser au maximum auprès des instances compétentes en Turquie. J'étais d'ailleurs soutenu très, très vigoureusement dans cette affaire par notre cher ami intellectuel et homme d'affaires qui est emprisonné depuis 5 ans, je me rappelle plus. Et nous avions donc espéré que nous arriverions à sensibiliser les milieux au niveau national, les milieux en charge du patrimoine, au niveau national turc, mais aussi régional. Avec son aide, on avait transmis cet article aux responsables locaux.
Osman Kavala, en fait, la personne
Osman Kavala, bien sûr.
qui est une figure majeure, qui a essayé en fait de chercher une voie de la réconciliation, mais pour l'instant il n'y a pas de retour. Moi j'avais pensé en fait, on avait essayé avec Johan Arapt et avec Tony Eastmond de construire un projet européen qui aurait en fait comme effet celui de sensibiliser la population locale au potentiel économique de ces sites.
La question que je me posais, je me souviens durant toute cette semaine où j'étais du matin jusqu'au soir dans la ville, c'était mais est-ce bien un témoignage de la même Arménie, de cette Arménie que nous essayons d'étudier à travers les livres, à travers quelques monuments modestes dans l'ensemble? Là, ce qui se dégage de cette ville, c'est un sentiment de puissance, de richesse, d'immense capacité à bâtir. Et je crois que c'est très intéressant pour le visiteur qui se promène dans ces régions-là de voir ce témoignage tout à fait inattendu, là, à l'extrémité de la Turquie, en face de l'actuelle Arménie. Je pense que c'est une expérience unique.
One of the problems, among the many others, is that the restorations of the last decades were not always very sensitive to
Right. Yeah. Well, I just was at Mren last Tuesday or last Wednesday, and I'm really wringing my hands now because it's in worse condition. There's no question the cracks are bigger and that the west facade is going to fall forward. and the north facade is going to fall towards the north. And I'm just speaking now about the present time. It's been a slow and sometimes difficult process of how do we care for this place now? How do we do that? What's the best way? And it is very complicated because you're talking about a city that is for Armenians a lost homeland and is under the control now of the Republic of Turkey, who has not acknowledge the genocide. So how do you navigate that when you're trying to restore Armenian churches in the city? And this is the tremendously complex problem for me. And there have been wonderful writings about it, recent writing by Hegnar Wadenpach, Peter Balakian. But for me, the most important thing really is the health of the monuments. Safeguarding the monuments for next generations. I think it's a question of, galvanizing something. And the difficult thing right now is that there are so many other concerns, with the earthquake and the flattening of Hatay province. And for Armenians, the Nagorno-Karabakh situation. So in a way, Mren is not a lucky church. And it's really not on anybody's priority list right now. But once it's gone, as you know very well, it's gone.
Ani was an impressive city in the medieval period. Has been discovered by romantics and scholars in the 19th century, becoming one of the major centers for the human cultural region. We have been there a few weeks ago, and we have assisted to the restorations of the 10th century cathedral we spoke about. In the restorations, will be cancelled the original frescoes, which are still preserved, while the rest of the building should be reconstructed as it was in origin. And this approach, so close to what was doing Viollet-le-Duc in the second half 19th century, may definitely compromise one of the major monuments of humankind. And this is not to speak about the small Church of the Virgins, which is hidden down from the hill, a splendid building in Rose Tufo, which we visited in 2017 and 2023, and in between, it has been largely damaged by hands of vandals who are willing to destroy it. Ani is in theory under the protection of UNESCO, but I should confess that today this is a menaced heritage.
There is nowhere like Ani, and I tell my students there are 5 senses, but then there's the sense of Ani. Ani is its own sense. It is just an extraordinary experience. I was just there. It's purple flowers and poppies and yellow flowers, and it's butterflies, and it's rose-colored starlings, the most beautiful creatures, alongside these buildings, which are living and breathing buildings. So I can't imagine. It's a deserted city, but it's, of course, exactly the opposite. So as an aesthetic experience, as a sensory experience, there is nothing like it. So I think that in itself, as a kind of full body, full mind experience, there is no comparison